All right, let's dive into this team decoder thing. You know I love a good deep dive, and we've got a ton to unpack here. Blog posts, pitches, even stories from folks actually using it should give us a pretty good idea of what they're all about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right from the get-go, they're tackling a problem pretty much every team deals with these days: constant change.
Totally. New goals,
Yeah,
restructuring, the list goes on. No wonder people feel overwhelmed.
and it can be a recipe for burnout, too. One quote from the material that really hit me was, "Our biggest problem is that we don't have time to solve our biggest problems." Like, how often do we actually say that?
All the time. It's the story of our lives, right?
And Team Decoder really zeroes in on this root cause. They say it all comes down to a lack of clarity, especially when it comes to roles and responsibilities.
Makes sense. If nobody knows who's doing what, chaos is inevitable. So how does Team Decoder bring order to the chaos?
They've got this whole three-pronged approach: framework, online tool, and a process for improvement. The framework is like the foundation. They call it role-based work, which is kind of self-explanatory.
Figure out what work needs to be done, then figure out who's best suited for it.
Exactly. But here's the thing. It's not some rigid one-size-fits-all system. They emphasize that it's ideology-free, open source. Any team can adapt it.
I noticed they use terms like domains, circles, links. Sounds kind of cool, actually.
Right, like you're building this well-oiled machine, not just assigning tasks.
Okay, so we've got the why with the framework. What about the how? That's where the online tool comes in, right?
Exactly. Think of it like a command center for teams. Team leaders can manage roles, workloads, even track development, all in one place.
The personalized reports caught my eye. Each team member gets one that outlines their purpose, tasks, how it all connects to the bigger picture.
That level of transparency can be a game changer, especially when it comes to reducing stress. And there's actual research to back it up. We're talking a 40% reduction in burnout, 74% less stress, even a decrease in sick days.
That's wild.
It's not just good for morale either, it's good for business.
Speaking of business, there's a story in here about GLS Germany. They used Team Decoder during this massive reorganization, and it was a lifesaver, especially for their agile teams who were juggling multiple roles.
See, it's all connected. Technology enables this level of transparency, which in turn builds trust within the team. And trust, that's the foundation for a healthier, more productive work environment.
Barsdorf, another company using Team Decoder, put it perfectly. It makes interdependencies visible that other systems and organizational charts cannot depict. Traditional methods often miss that human element.
Totally. But Team Decoder isn't just for massive overhauls or dealing with constant change. It's actually designed for all sorts of situations a team might face.
Launching a new project, navigating a merger, even something like a leadership transition, seems like they've got a solution for everything.
What's really interesting is they're already looking ahead, talking about incorporating AI to further optimize workload and team structure. But we'll dive into that a bit later.
Okay, AI can wait. What about a real-world example? There's this one about Good Healthcare Group. They used Team Decoder to create a whole new key account management team,
And it helped them define those roles and responsibilities right out of the gate, gave everyone a clear sense of purpose.
which is crucial, especially when you're building something from scratch. Speaking of building, who's this whole thing actually for? We keep hearing about these big companies, but is it only for them?
That's a great question because while we've heard about these large-scale implementations, Team Decoder is designed for teams of all sizes.
Startups, established companies, the whole shebang.
Exactly. And they offer different plans too. There's a free plan for smaller teams and a Go plan for a monthly fee if you need unlimited users. They're even working on a PRO version down the line. Plus, they've got consulting services, an academy for coaches, the works.
Wow, they're really building an ecosystem around this. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's unpack this whole role-based work thing a little further. It's not just about giving people fancy new job titles, right?
Definitely not. It's about moving away from those static job descriptions, the ones that just sit on a shelf gathering dust. Team Decoder is all about creating roles that can actually adapt and evolve as the team's needs change.
Which is crucial in today's world, right? Things change so fast. One blog post even called traditional org charts outdated.
Because clinging to those rigid structures can stifle innovation and growth, Team Decoder's framework and tools let teams embrace that evolution, but in a way that's manageable.
One thing I keep coming back to is this focus on transparency and open communication. Like, they specifically promote these campfire meetings where teams regularly discuss their workflow.
Those meetings are key. It's a dedicated time for open dialogue, collaborative decision-making. Everyone gets a voice, not just the team leader.
It's about using technology to facilitate those conversations, not dictate them.
Right. And that kind of transparency, it hinges on trust. And
Yeah.
it seems like Team Decoder really gets that.
Oh, yeah, one of their pitches even says it directly. Clear roles and responsibilities are the foundation for a high-trust team. Which makes sense, because when you trust your team, you're more likely to communicate openly, share ideas, all that good stuff.
It's a win-win. Trust leads to better communication, which leads to better problem solving. It's a beautiful cycle.
And it's not just some feel-good concept either. They're claiming a 40% reduction in burnout, a 50% increase in productivity, and 74% less stress just from implementing this system.
Those are some pretty compelling numbers.
Those are lives changed. But okay, let's say I'm a team leader listening to this. I'm convinced. What's my first step? Do I just head over to the Team Decoder website and dive in headfirst?
The website's a great place to start, for sure. It's www.teamdecoder.com. They've got tons of resources, different plans, even a free trial you can check out.
But let's be real, switching to a whole new way of working can be intimidating.
Definitely. But Team Decoder seems to have anticipated that.
How so?
They directly address those concerns about switching. They talk about common misconceptions about role-based work, the importance of getting leadership on board, because, let's face it, if the boss isn't into it, it's not going to fly. And they stress celebrating those small wins along the way to keep the momentum going.
It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to experiment, even fail sometimes, because that's how we learn.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Remember how we were talking about AI earlier? They actually see a role for AI in this whole transition to role-based work.
Ooh, AI. Tell me more.
It's not about replacing humans with robots or anything like that. It's about using AI strategically, taking some of the weight off our shoulders so we can focus on what we humans excel at. Creative problem solving, building relationships, that kind of stuff.
So less robots are taking over and more robots are doing the boring stuff so we don't have to.
Exactly. Imagine AI taking care of things like scheduling meetings, compiling reports, maybe even answering some of those tedious emails.
That would free up so much mental space. I love it.
Right. And Team Decoder has features built right in for workload planning and management. So AI can help lighten the load, and the platform itself helps prevent people from getting overloaded in the first place.
And don't forget about that compare mode we talked about earlier, where you can visually see everyone's workloads to make sure things are distributed fairly.
Such an important point. It's about fostering that culture of fairness and transparency, which is crucial for any team, really.
Couldn't agree more. But all of this, the AI, the workload management, the transparency, it all points back to that theme of continuous improvement. It's not enough to just have the tools. You need a system, a process.
And that's what I appreciate about Team Decoder. They're not just throwing tools at you and saying, good luck. They're guiding you through the process with those campfire meetings, the workload management features, even providing templates based on what's worked for other successful companies.
It's like a roadmap to success.
Exactly. And the best part, it's a roadmap that's constantly being updated and refined based on real-world experience and feedback.
Okay, so let's recap for a second. We've talked about how Team Decoder tackles this very real problem of constant change and pressure in the workplace, right? They're all about bringing clarity and transparency to roles, responsibilities, and workloads.
And they do it through this combination of a flexible framework, intuitive tools, and a genuine commitment to continuous team improvement.
And they're not just making stuff up either. They back it all up with hard data, compelling client stories, and a vision for the future that's both ambitious and achievable.
It's a holistic approach. It combines the power of technology with the importance of human connection and collaboration.
So for everyone listening who's ready to ditch the outdated org chart and try a more dynamic, human-centered approach to teamwork,
Team Decoder might just be the solution you've been waiting for.